Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Ken Beatty. I'm a TESOL professor and a materials writer, and I'm very, very happy to be talking to you today by the invitation of Pearson as well as Edumation. Big thanks to Louisa as well as to Ola at Pearson. So what are we talking about? Well, the title of the presentation is Beyond the Buzz: Employability Skills and Language Learning. But what is this buzz thing? What does buzz mean? Well, every once in a while, we get a new exciting thing comes up in education. We've seen so many of them in the last little while: augmented learning, gamification, badges. They all come up, and some are successful, some are less than successful. Artificial intelligence right now is the biggest buzz, and everybody's talking about it, but we don't always know what to do with it. So what I'm talking about by going beyond the buzz is really to discuss the idea of, like, what exactly is employability skills? So I'm going to be asking a few questions about that. Now, in the presentation, the most important slide is the last one. On the last slide, that's where you'll find my email address. And if you have any questions after the presentation, then please just email me and we can have a little conversation. Also, this video will be available to you afterwards, but if you want a copy of the PDF of it, you can write me and ask for that as well. Okay, so without going further, let's begin. Okay, so what do you want to do when you grow up? It's one of the big questions that we ask everybody when they're children. When children are young, we're always asking them this. And this was my own two sons many years ago when they were 3 and young Spencer was just out of the hospital. So Nathan was 3, just out of the hospital for Spencer. And of course, you know, we would say, what do you want to be when you grew up? Or in any case, they would just tell us. So in this case, what did Nathan want to do? He wanted to be a garbage truck driver. That was the most exciting thing in his life at that time. The big garbage truck would come by. It was so noisy, and he'd be by the window looking out and sort of seeing what they were doing. And he said, I want to drive the garbage truck. Well, this went on for a little while. And then one day I say, oh, do you want to go talk to the garbage truck drivers? Oh, yes. So we went down, and then what? The smell, he couldn't stand it. So he changed his mind. He changed his mind about becoming a garbage truck driver. So this is typical. Is we change our own ideas throughout our lives about what kind of jobs we like or we want to do, because we get a little bit of experience with them and it's not what we expected. Some people have no choice. My grandfather was a farmer. His grandfather, his father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, probably the men in his family for 1,000 years were farmers, both in Canada and before that in Germany. He was expected to become a farmer, and that was all he could do. My father, though, he was the youngest of 7 children in his family, and so he didn't have the choice to be the farmer because, you know, his older brothers and they were taking over the farm. So he had 3 jobs. He left school at 16 to work in a bank. And then he worked physically as a longshoreman, moving things off boats in Vancouver. And then later he became an accountant. He went back to his mathematical mind. And he was always very, very smart mathematically. So he was able to do that. So 3 jobs in his life. But me, 31 jobs? Are you kidding? So many, but maybe like you as well. You've had many little jobs, you know, throughout your life. And I've worked since I was 16. I mean, I paid for my university and everything else, but I had to work through high school and university. Newspaper boy, cleaner, lifeguard, selling cameras, teaching swimming and boating, so many different jobs like that. I worked as a museum photographer for 1 summer. I studied to be a playwright, and all these different jobs, but the ones in blue are the ones that I still do. Writing for 12 publishers. I'm a professor of TESOL, and I'm a consultant doing jobs like today. So I have many, many jobs, and they continue. they continue. What about my sons? What about my sons? Those two little guys that I showed you in the previous sign. Who knows? Who knows how many jobs that they will have? One has a degree in international economics, the other in computer science, and they're living in Bali right now, and they're starting their own online business. Maybe they'll be billionaires, maybe not. Maybe they'll find another job. I have no idea. But but it's the idea that they actually will try different things throughout their lives is more or less expected. So what is the role of employability skills? It's different for different people, but there are some things that we have in common, so we can ask some questions. So these are our questions for today. So number one, why employability skills? Why should we teach them? When and who to teach? Who should be learning employability skills? What are employers' expectations, and how are those changing? And how do we integrate employability skills in language instruction? And so that's the biggest one for us, is because we're teachers and we want to see, like, okay, in the language classroom, what do we do? Where do we turn for help? Do we have to do this all by ourselves, or can we get help from some places? And then finally, how do we measure success? How do we know that our students are actually learning what we're teaching? So let's go through those questions one at a time in the presentation today. So we'll start off with the first one, why employability skills? So employability skills, my grandfather didn't need them. Nobody ever looked at him and said, what are you going to do when you grow up? They knew he was going to become a farmer. So it really wasn't a question for him. But my grandfather, even though he didn't need them, today almost everyone needs employability skills. Well, maybe not if your father's a billionaire or your parents are billionaires or something. But most people, they need some employability skills unless they're taking over their parents' business in some case, like my grandfather did. But what about us as teachers? Like, really, are we expected to teach this new thing? I started off teaching secondary school, and I just remember every time there was something new that came along, some new issue, some social issue, they say, oh, who can teach this? Oh, let's ask the language teacher to teach this, the English teachers, they can do it. And they would give us all these extra things and say, this is important right now, you teach this. So really, are we supposed to be teaching employability skills on top of all our other struggles to get, students reading, writing, listening, and speaking? Well, I'm afraid so. And in any case, is it just a buzzword? Will it disappear like some of these other things that seemed so important a few years ago? Reinventing the university, terms that we just don't pay attention to anymore. Is it just another buzzword? Does it describe new skills? And is it important to teach? And important to teach in the language classroom? So a lot of questions here. Sorry, what's with all the bees? Okay, so the buzz, of course, with the bees, and I'm just using this as a kind of eye candy, so something for you to enjoy while I watch this, but it's also a trick. And this is a trick you can use as well, because tomorrow, the next week, next month, next year, you're going to see a bee and you're going to think, oh, I remember Professor Beatty talking about employability skills. So when you see a bee, you'll think about Dr. Beatty, right? Okay, so we'll keep going. Buzzwords. So the term employability skills first became popular in the 1960s. This is a Google tool called Ngram, very useful for charting, how popular words are over time. It continues to climb in popular use. People are talking about it a lot. So how do we define it? Like, what exactly are employability skills? Well, a very basic definition is are skills that help people get jobs. Then beyond that, advance in those jobs, so get promoted in some way to better or even different positions. So it allows them to move through a company or even to jump to another company or something. So these are the basic ideas behind employability skills. Are there new skills? I mean, really, people have gotten jobs for thousands of years. My great-grandfathers, they didn't go to school and learn employability skills. Are there new skills that people in the past never had to learn? Well, I think there are. I think there are a lot. In fact, there are so many. And if you want to go a little crazy, just go online and look up, employability skills, and you'll see them listed on Google, one after the other, 12 employability skills, 16 employability skills, 25 most important employability skills. But there's so many, and some of them go, I think, a little too far. Maybe they're not really things that we need to concern ourselves about. Anger management, I think it's important, but I'm not think it's important for the language classroom. Leisure planning, how's leisure? How's that about employability? These are real ones that I've looked up. Stress management, I think that's maybe good for people who are working. Autonomous living, though, living on your own, it's kind of getting too far away from employability skills. There's other ones that seem important, but again, I'm not sure what we can do about them. So for example, numeracy. So numeracy is about, numbers and math and everything else. And when I was a young, just starting out teaching secondary school, I taught math and social studies and English. So I think math is really important. But at the same time, I don't think it's something most teachers can teach in the classroom. So what should we be teaching? What should we be teaching? Well, out of all of those employability skills, we should be looking for ones that are also language skills. Then it makes sense. It makes sense for us to teach those, because then we understand, okay, their language skills, their employability skills, I can cover them at the same time. And the students will benefit, but still, I'm not going and teaching something really unusual. Okay, so what are 7 key language and employability skills, ones that fit both categories essentially? They're critical thinking, communication, creativity, collaboration, working with other people, self-management, organizing yourself, leadership, and social responsibility. I'm going to talk about these a little bit later, but that's just put that in your head and think about these as we go through the following slides. Okay, the next question, when and who to teach? So who are we supposed to be teaching these employability skills to? Well, first of all, when is it important to teach these skills? Well, obviously, are we going to teach babies? No, babies don't need to learn employability skills. The people who really need to learn are teenagers and adults, especially young adults when they're preparing to enter the job market, but also quite often, people will maybe lose their jobs. I think with artificial intelligence, there's many jobs which are going to disappear. And if those jobs disappear, then those people who were doing them beforehand will need to retrain. So they're people who are going to maybe be coming back for extra language training, and during that language training, also getting some employability skills. In all of these groups, the motivation is essential. So teenagers, they're in school, having fun, social, making friends. But then in the back of their mind, they're thinking, oh, I'm going to have to start a job soon. What am I going to do? How am I going to do it? So they're motivated. People who are adults or young adults, of course, they need to support themselves, support their families. So they are also highly motivated. So these are important aspects to it. So out of these groups, though, these adults and teenagers, how do we divide them up? Who is important to teach? I'm going to just suggest 5 groups. I'm sure there's more, but these are just 5 that we can start with at the beginning. So the first one is secondary students who are about to enter the workplace. So again, in terms of motivation, these are the ones who really are a little bit more motivated to learn these employability skills. And they're going to benefit from those employability skills, even if they're simply going to university. It's still useful. You just have to sort of make a little mental jump with these students and say, okay, boss, professor, right? Other students, those are your colleagues. Your assignments, that's the work you have to do. Learning, in both. That's the training in the workplace. It's what you're learning at university. So the parallels about how you do those things, how you interact with your professors' bosses, with your students, other students, colleagues, with your work, your training, all of those things. It's makes sense. It makes sense. So you just have to kind of stretch that out for students. And if a student in high school says, oh, why are we learning employability skills? I'm just going to university. I won't get a job for another 4 years, right? No, you can say, well, there's reasons for doing this. Of course, once they are university students, then they're much more motivated because they have a very clear idea, usually, about what they're going to do, but not always. Because as you know, you've seen from my case, you know, I started off studying different things and then went in different directions with different jobs. My first degree was in geography. Then I studied education to become a teacher. So it's not always what you think it's going to be. So, but many students do have highly specific ideas about the types of jobs they will have and what it takes to get there. So that's good. That's a good situation. Another interesting group are immigrants, people who come to your country and they're moving there, and they've decided they want to move to your specific country, and then wherever that is, and then they are going to have a job of some kind. But usually they come, you know, having thought carefully about the move, about what they're going to do, and you know what jobs they'll have when they're there. My mother and her parents came to Canada in 1930 from Norway, so they moved to Canada from Norway. And they knew what they would do. They would become farmers as well. They weren't, my grandfather was actually an oiler. He worked on the big boats hunting whales. So he had to change his job to a farmer and learn new things. But he had a plan to do that. They knew what they knew what to expect. That's not true. That's not true for the fourth group, which is refugees. Refugees, people who have to leave their homeland because of war. They have to leave it because often now, because of climate disasters, there's massive flooding or drought, or the farms fail, and they have to leave their country for some reason. They have you know their own, they quickly move to another country, maybe not the country they wanted to, and maybe they're not familiar with. They haven't been able to do all that forward planning. Also, they may carry trauma. They're, you know, often the students in particular, the children, they're upset about leaving everyone and everything they know, including their first language. And then suddenly they're in a new world. And that can be quite difficult. It's one of the most challenging groups to teach. But again, they need employability skills because they have to get jobs. And the fifth one is anyone else. Anyone else who needs or wants English for the workplace. And again, that includes people who have maybe lost their job and want to get into another job, or people who are maybe got a great job, but they just decide, I've had enough. I want to try something else. And there's many, many people, including teachers, who decide after a while, say, I've enjoyed teaching, but now I want to, you know, maybe open a business or my own store or start a restaurant or something. We see that all the time. So those are our groups. Okay, what about the third question? What are employers' expectations? What do employers expect? Well, employers expect more. They expect a lot more these days than they did before. I think a lot of jobs in the past, it used to be much more about training on the job. You would get the job and you would just be expected to learn there. You'd be a junior person, you'd learn everything, and then after a few years, you would go up in the job market. So in these cases, language is vital, but proficiency in language alone, it's not enough for students to succeed in their chosen careers. They need something else, and that something else are a number of skills for the job, but also those employability skills. So what exactly do employers expect? Well, it's a lot. If you look this up, again, you come up with these long lists of things. You know, they expect that, you know, an eagerness to learn. That seems like a really good and long-term one. Leadership initiative, you know, dressing properly. Okay, well, depends on your job and where you are and such. But, you know, motivation to improve, those are big ones. Adaptability. You can see a number of these are actually ones about once you have the job, you're going to grow. You're going to grow in the job. And it's not just like you get the job and you do it. How many of you as teachers, you thought before you went into teacher training, you think, I know all about teaching. I sat there in a classroom for, for 16 years already, all through primary school, secondary school, and university. I know what being a teacher is. But then when you begin teaching and when you do teacher training, you realize, oh, there's a lot more to this teaching than I thought. I mean, I think we all thought that, when we first began teaching. I certainly did. But it kind of grow into the job, and that's really what's important. Okay, so what are some employer challenges that are faced there? Like, what about from the employer's point of view? Well, salary waste. These are concepts. This is from an article in Axios. They say 55% of workers lose 30 minutes to 2 hours a day clarifying details. They have to go to their boss and say, sorry, you asked me to do this, but I don't understand. What exactly do you want? And what do you mean? It's like 30 minutes to 2 hours a day. Alignment, it says 86% of workers, that's a huge number. Their goals are not the same goals as the company. The company's maybe says, sell, sell, sell. We want to move more products. We want to do this, or we want to grow. But the employers are just thinking, I just want to do my job today. I just want to finish the day. I'm not, thinking about growing the company. How is that benefiting me, really? Retention. A lot of workers, almost half, if they don't feel aligned to the goals of the company, or don't feel what the company wants is what they want, they're thinking about leaving within 2 years. So that's interesting. A lot of movement there. Leadership, they say only 26% of workers say the leaders define and accomplish an action plan when they have tough issues. So there's a problem with the company or a problem with the market. They say, the leadership really doesn't do things. So when you flip that figure and you say that 74% don't do it, it's really kind of bad. And then executive distraction. They say that half of the leadership, they don't really do, they don't get involved enough in projects the way that they typically should. So all of these are problems, mostly from the leadership of the company perspective. But what's interesting for us is all 5 challenges are communication issues, all of them. They're all talking really about communication. So again, that puts it back into our classroom. And for our students who want to grow into a company, want to make companies better, want to move up in a company, that's important to understand that communication and the communication skills that we can share with them, that's going to move them forward. Okay, so how do we integrate employability skills in language instruction? Okay, so this is a question. It's a big one. So there's a lot of skills that we have, and how do we fit them into our language classroom so that we're not just forgetting about all the things about reading, writing, listening, and speaking, and not covering those because we're trying to teach them how to get jobs or move up in their jobs. Well, we can go back again to those 7 key employability skills that are also language skills. And those are, again, critical thinking, communication, creativity, collaboration, self-management, leadership, and social responsibility. So we've got these seven key points basically. And again, they're all language issues or language things that we can deal with. So let's go through them one at a time, starting off with critical thinking. So critical thinking, it's made up of various parts. One of them is to identify relationships. So relationships may be between things that don't seem to fit. You're thinking, okay, how does this work? Draw logical conclusions based on data or claims. So that's obviously being able to interpret data as well. Create strategies, theories, methods, or arguments based on evidence. And then evaluate procedures and solutions. When you think about all of these little definitions of what makes up critical thinking, you sort of start to realize, this sounds familiar. I know, it's the scientific process. It's the scientific process of investigating problems, coming up with hypotheses, testing them out, evaluating your results, and then the final step, making them public, sharing them with other people. So that kind of scientific thinking, applying that, well, we can do that in the classroom all the time. That's an easy thing for us to do. So why is critical thinking a challenge, though? Like we have a lot of problems with, often introducing it to students, or we see just in the workplace or anywhere in life that a lot of people don't use a lot of critical thinking. You're saying, really? Why do you believe that? That's crazy. Or what's that conspiracy theory? Look at the facts. Why would you say that? Why do you think the earth is flat? Right? You talk to people like that and there seems like no point. It's a problem because too much of our educations are based on memorizing facts and rules rather than figuring out how things work and creating our own new solutions. So we are presented in school over and over and over again, say, here, these are the facts. Read this book, memorize this, look at this map, look at this data, look at these things and take it as truth. And we don't get enough opportunities for students just to say, okay, look at this. What do you think? Which one is better? Which one is better? Which one makes more sense to you? Why? And those sorts of questions, which is really what we need to be doing a little bit more. So it is a bit of a challenge. So what do we do with that? How do we set that up in the classroom? Well, I'm going to give a few examples from Pearson, from just some of the textbooks, different textbooks, and I'm just poking through and trying to give some employability skills. And this is an important point just to make right away, is you don't have to do everything by yourself. There's lots of materials out there to help you. You don't have to say, oh, employability skills, I have no idea. Do I have to, go back to university to study this? No, it's often in the books. So here's an interesting one. It's a perspectives metaphor. So the metaphor is putting on different hats. What does that mean? It means putting yourself in the place of other people to try to understand how they think. So it's critical thinking, and this is, this book is dealing specifically with this. And it makes this point. Look at the photo, the woman with the two hats. Perspective taking is compared to wearing different hats. When you put on someone else's hat, you view an issue from their perspective. How can this practice improve performance at work? Okay, so really what it's saying is, if you look at a problem from your perspective, from the boss's perspective, from the company's perspective, maybe the customer's perspective, how does everybody see this a little bit differently? And why is that important? So that's it. But what I love about this particular one, and something we, again, need to do more, is ask open-ended questions. We're not saying, how many hats is she holding, or something like that. Which is the best hat for her, something, which hat will fit her head or something, no. It's an open-ended question. How can this practice improve performance at work? I don't know the answer. There's many, many answers. So students, when you ask a very, very simple question and you say something like, what is the capital of England? It's a boring question, London, somebody will say. One student puts up their hand, London, and everybody else goes back to sleep. But if you say a question, you say, why do you think London is the capital of England? Oh, well, the Romans were there one time. Historically, it's on a river, so it's good for navigation. Oh, it's a big river, and so on and so on. All of a sudden, everyone can contribute, everyone can have an idea, and everyone can be part of the conversation, the discussion. As they're doing that, they're speaking and listening, so they're developing those skills. So again, it's a kind of a subversive way to get students thinking and using their communication skills. Here's another one. in the same unit, I think, says, think about a time when someone made a decision that had a negative effect on you. Did the decision maker use perspective taking to find a compromise? Did they look at it from your perspective, or were they just looking at it for them? How? If not, do you wish that they had? So listen to an example. They have an example there. But again, what this is doing, and I've put in the little blue box there, relate what students need to learn to what they already know. So it's an important thing because students have experiences. We used to think, students come to class, we just open up their heads and we pour in the information and then they go away, they're educated. It's not like that. Our students come to class with a lot of experiences and we have to take advantage of that, right? Okay, so the second one, communication. We think about communication, and our first thoughts are reading, writing, speaking, listening, but there's so many more sub-skills. There's lots and lots of sub-skills to this. Things like negotiation. Negotiation is so important, but again, we don't do enough of this in the classroom. Say, okay, I want you to argue between things. You have to negotiate to decide what's the best one. You could say even as a class activity, here's two choices. Which one do you want to do? You discuss it and then tell me, right? So then they have to negotiate between the two choices, things like that. Genre-specific documents like reports and emails. This is important for communication. We teach essays and paragraphs and sentences, but students they don't go to their office on the first day and the boss says, oh, good, welcome. Okay, now your first job, I want you to sit down and write a 500-word essay. No, they don't ask you to do that. It's never going to happen. But understanding the structure of an essay is to understand what an argument is. So that's important. But there's other specific documents like reports and emails that, again, students need to learn how to do that in a business environment. In this, part of it is what you say and how you say it and the medium that you use to say it in, right? So again, here's a couple examples from this from the book. I'll just summarize these for you. The type I know is a little bit small, but if you want to look at it later, again, ask me for the PDF or you can look at the video again. But in this one, essentially what's happening is the person in yellow is an employee at this company, and the one in green is his manager. And he's just had a customer come in who got really angry because her phone plan had changed price or something like that. He thinks it's a joke. And the boss is obviously very upset. And at the beginning, the boss doesn't even know who's writing to him because it's not giving the, he hasn't given his whole name or something. So the medium, sending a text to your boss like this is inappropriate. And the topic and everything he's discussing is completely inappropriate for a workplace situation. The customer should come first, right? So she's created a situation. The guy's created a situation that the boss now needs to deal with. Here's a second scenario, and this is interesting in a different way. This is a designer. He's working on a computer. He's having to use a lot of videos suddenly, and his computer is so slow because it's an old computer. What does he want? What does he want? He wants a new computer. But when he explains the problem, he says, yes, it's taking a long time because, the computer is so slow. But his boss says, oh, no problem. You don't have to finish this for a couple of weeks. What's happened is he hasn't really explained himself what he wants. So, and this is also the problem, is the medium. The medium is a conversation, and he's just telling her. But really, if he wanted a new computer, what should he do? He should write it out, explain, this computer was, we bought this in 1992. It's so old now. And a new computer would be twice as fast. It would make me more efficient in my job, and this is the cost involved and such. I hope you can support me on this. That would make a lot more sense. So again, these are things, it doesn't say everything there, but it forces the students to think about different solutions to the problem, how they would deal with it. So that's important. Okay, creativity. Engage in some kind of unconventional thinking, to think about problems. And this is a big issue, is most of our jobs now with AI and with computers and with everything else, most of our jobs are problem solving these days. Robots are taking over the warehouses. We don't need physical labor as much on farms anymore. We've got huge, big machines that, one person can run. And even now we're starting to have robots on farms as well. So things are changing. But the one thing that none of these do very well is problem solving. So that's a good skill for us. So another one is being motivated to engage in creative activities. So just finding it fun and looking at it and not thinking, oh God, I hate this, creative activity. I never know what the answer is. So getting students motivated about that. And embrace in ambiguity and risk-taking. This is an unusual one, but it's a big part of creativity. Ambiguity is not knowing what exactly is meant. Risk-taking is trying something out, trying something out. So what do we mean by ambiguity? Well, when we look back at something that Paul Grice wrote a long time ago, 1975, but it's a great idea. He said, when you're in a conversation, there's expectations. There's expectations that you will be truthful, you will be concise, you will be relevant, and you will be clear. Like your topics will all follow those rules. But, you know, people are not always truthful. They're not always concise. They're not always relevant. And they're not always clear when they're trying to explain something to you. So, and they have different reasons for doing that. So students need help. And what they really need help with are language strategies. So again, these are employability issues, but they're really, really important language strategies in every situation. And we use this, you know, with our friends and our relatives, not being specific, you know, and you have to find ways to say, okay, you seem to be speaking very generally. What is the specific problem? The use of homonyms, two words that sound the same, but they have different meanings. Read, you know, for an instrument, or read a book, or read in a marsh of some kind, right? They sound the same, but they have different meanings. Odd word choices, when people choose unusual words. Unclear intentions. Why are you asking me this? You know, what exactly do you want? And unreliable narrators. So, for example, many salespeople may be considered an unreliable narrator. They say, "Oh, this is the best car you can buy, and you know, you'll never see the price go so low," and things. And you think, okay, well, maybe they're just saying that because they, you know, they want to make the sale, but they're not really reliable. And we need to find strategies for dealing with each of these. So that's an important thing. How do we do that? Well, again, going back to the book, exploring these things through stories, because when someone tells a story, again, you can start asking, say, you know, why those choice of words? What exactly, you know, are their intentions? What do they want? Is it a reliable story? And you go into activities like, tell me about a happy memory. So when you tell me about a happy memory that you have, you know, again, what is your intention? What do you want me to feel? Or do you want me to feel good for you? Or do you want me to feel like this is something you could do? You know, so if I tell you, say, oh, I had one of my very, very happy memories is just, wandering through the woods on a quiet afternoon, seeing the birds in the trees or something. And then are you thinking, why is he telling me this? Say, does he want me to do this, experience this as well? Say, yeah, maybe. So, understanding that is important. Or is he just bragging? Say, it's like saying, oh yes, my favorite memory is when, I took my private jet to, this beach. No, that's just bragging. So again, what's the intention? The fourth one is collaboration. So interpersonal communication. Task management is a big one, and conflict resolution is huge. Again, we don't create a lot of situations in the language classroom with lots of conflict, with differences of opinion, but we need to. I have a friend, and he is the biggest liar in the world. He's a lawyer, but he never stops lying to his children. And it used to drive us nuts. And the kids would say, oh, Dad, can we go to the beach? And he would say, the beach? He said, oh, no, I think the crocodiles would eat us. Dad, there's no crocodiles on the beach. He said, prove it. So the kids would run off and they go to Google or something. They'd look up the beach, they'd everything else. And they say, no, they come back saying, no, crocodiles don't live here. They don't live here at all. I said, okay, let's go to the beach then, right? So what was he doing? What was he always doing? He was always challenging them to think and to build up ideas. And if they wanted anything, he would say, state your case, just like a lawyer, state your case, or a judge. And they say, oh, can we have some ice cream? State your case. And they would have to say, oh, well, it's really hot outside and it's 2 hours before dinner, so it won't ruin our dinner. I think it's okay. All right, we can have ice cream. But he was always creating these conflicts. I don't know what happened to the children, if they grew up to hate him or not, but or probably they both became lawyers. Okay, conflict. A big one is, what are the rules versus money? So that's a big one that we see in books, and this is activities around that. You know that you see something wrong at your company, but it's going to cost the company a lot of money. What do you do, right? It's a good question. So we have to create problems for students to solve using critical and creative thinking. The solutions shouldn't be obvious, so we create problems for them. Or better yet, be a lazy teacher, get the students to create the problems and run those through. Self-management, strategically manage one's emotions, behavior, effort, and environment, just in pursuit of your goals, just, having to self-discipline yourself about, how do I manage myself to go forward. Okay, so one curious fact here, I started work as a teacher working with emotionally disturbed children and teenagers, and I ended up working in a prison for children. Really 12 to 17, terrible kids. 86% of them continued on and became prisoners as adults. What about those 14% that didn't? In every single case, the only thing that changed was that they met someone that they fell in love with who said, "I don't like it when you do that." And they moved out of the criminal system. Interesting. So again, finding out about how other people live their lives has so many insights. When you talk to other people, you think, what matters most? What matters to you? So again, here's some activities in this particular book just about that. It's interesting. Okay, leadership. There's so many things about leadership. Challenge assumptions, establish a vision, possibilities for the future, collaborate, communicate, cooperate. What's the difference between collaborate and cooperate? To collaborate is when you work closely together on a problem and you don't separate it. Cooperate, that's collaborate. When you cooperate, you divide a problem up into different parts. We're going to paint a house. Okay, you paint the outside, I'll paint the inside, right? But when you're collaborating, you're doing everything together. You hold the ladder and I'll hold a paintbrush, right? So that's different. Respect contributions, empower others, maintain accountability, mentor and support. It sounds like a lot, right? But really, and it's not for our students. Most of our students are entry level. They're going to be getting their first job or moving into a job. And in this case, all the leadership things, nobody is going to say, yes, we'll make you the president of the company the first day, unless your father owns the company or your mother owns the company. So again, the biggest ones for us are collaborate, communicate, and cooperate. And those are such big language issues. So again, materials can help with that. This is an interesting one. Are you a team player? So again, this is really good because I think this is important for us to figure out, do we do better working on our own or working in a group? So what kind of person are we? Most teachers actually do very, very well working on their own. They're in their own classroom. They do that all day long, and they don't really interact with other people so much. But in other cases, you have to work with people all the time. Do you enjoy that? Is that your personality type? Find out. Okay, social responsibility is to behave ethically with sensitivity towards social, cultural, civic, and environmental issues. This is really an important issue, just, generally just being a better human being in many ways. What do employers look for in terms of this and these sorts of behaviors? Well, when we talk to someone, we try to find what we have in common with them. When you meet a stranger, you get into a conversation, you find out what you have in common with them. For me, my first teaching job was ridiculous. I had to go see the director of instruction for the school board. And he was a terrible, terrible person. He was an old ex-military, worked in the Navy, and he was really gruff, and he was known to be, to eat teachers, we would say. He'd look at their CVs when you went to apply. If he found a spelling mistake, he would yell at you and say, "What do you expect to be a teacher?" And he'd start screaming at you and say, "You can't even do your own work. Get out, like that. So anyway, I was very nervous about going to see him. The secretary said, "Please don't say anything, just sit down and let him talk." And I said, okay. So I sat down in front of him and he took my CV and he started reading through. The very, very last line was, it said, plays water polo. So I played water polo for years. And he looks up, he says, oh, Oh, water polo. Turns out during World War II, he would dive off the side of a ship in the Mediterranean, and they would play water polo. So he told me all about this, didn't ask a single question, and I got a job the next week. My first teaching job. Well, why? Because, he felt a connection to me. So building those connections are important to students. Yeah. Start playing water polo. Okay. So showing character. So this one about social responsibility and things. It's the things that you do that you don't have to do that really make an impression on other people if you're doing good work. Okay, so where do we turn for help? So many jobs, so much to do. This is, really, this is a big question about, we've got so much work to do. Where do we get help if we're going to teach employability skills? Okay, well, one thing we can do is you can always reach out to employers and survey them. Ask employers if you've met some or know some, or if some especially have hired your students in the past. Go back to them and just say, oh, I know that, some of my students are working at your company now. They've told me, can you tell me about the employability skills? How's my student doing? And how, what else should I have taught them before they came to you? So they might have some very specific things. Say, oh, well, it'd be useful if they learn more about this, or they had problems, with this when they came to the company, and, if we had to teach them there, but you could teach them. So you might get a lot of feedback from employers to sort of help you through those situations. So that could be good. So talking to employers is really, really great. The other one is to get students involved. Now, you don't have to do all the work. I talk all the time about being a lazy teacher. And what I mean is not to, just, go to sleep in the classroom. But what I really mean is there a job that you're doing that the students could do instead? So think about that. And I think, really, if the students could create the problems in your classrooms that need to be solved, or create learning materials, or teach part of the unit, or something, teach the grammar part of the unit. Each week, somebody else takes a turn. Why not get them doing more? Because again, those are not just communication skills, they're also employability skills. The other thing that happens that's really interesting is they gain respect. They gain respect for the teacher once they have to try teaching themselves. They sort of see, oh, I didn't realize it'd be so difficult, They get a new impression when they have to do that. So get your students involved with creating the materials and doing that. So in terms of employability skills, many of your students, because of their studies, maybe if they're studying nursing or some other thing, maybe they know some nurses, or they're professors of nursing, maybe if they're in university, but they might also have friends and family connections, and they can be a great resource about what is important in terms of employability skills. So I just said in the last slide, I said, do a survey and talk to them. Say, why should I do that? I would give that as a great task for my students to say, find an adult, could be your mom or dad, could be, your brother or sister, your older brother or sister, could be just somebody you happen to know, a friend of the family, and ask them and say, what are the most important employability skills in your job? And then they come back, they do a presentation, they share with the rest of the class. Then you say to the class, okay, listen, everybody's got different ideas here. Work together. I want a list of the 10 most important ones, or the 20 most important ones from all the presentations here today. They're talking, listening, negotiating, arguing. Fantastic. Using their critical thinking, being creative about it. They're using all those great skills to sort of deal with the problem. So think about that. Think about, again, shifting more responsibility for the students. It's what's going to happen when they get a job anyway, right? Publish your resources. I've just shown you some, there are textbooks already from Pearson that are great resources, but even any publisher, just talk to the publisher and say, yeah, I have to teach employability skills now, or I want to integrate that in. What do you have? A lot of the resources are actually, are also free resources that they have outside. It's not always just a textbook. There's a lot of other things that are available. Sometimes it could be an app of some kind that might be useful. I don't think this is a free app, but this app Mondly is fantastic for improving students' teaching and learning abilities, learning abilities outside of the classroom. Why do you have to do that? Well, it's because, there's never enough time in a classroom to learn a language. You always want to have a little bit more. So, take advantage of that and try to get them using Mondly or other apps to basically continue their education. The great thing about Mondly and the other Pearson apps that are available is they're tied in quite often to the textbook, so they can use the textbook, then go do more work on their own. They're not going to spend an hour with it. They're going to do it for 5 minutes or 10 minutes here, there, on the bus, waiting at the bank, just all the spare time that you have waiting for dinner. And they'll fill in their time doing some additional study. So that's a good thing to do. There's a new report, and this is an example of one of those free resources, How English Empowers Your Tomorrow. The life-changing impact of learning English for your career and beyond. So it's a fantastic report. I've read the whole thing, and it's just new, and it really talks about all sorts of ideas. They're useful in different ways. First of all, it gives you a lot of really practical information, but it also gives you arguments. So sometimes you have to convince students, like, why is English important? And it gives you all of those ideas. It shows how English is used in the workplace and how, when students do have English, how they can get better jobs, better pay, and they can be more satisfied. This is a fascinating one. This is one I really popped out for me. Job satisfaction by proficiency level. So people who have a proficiency in English, when they're working in a job, they're elementary, say moderate, intermediate, and advanced, you can see it just goes from elementary. If you've got a very low level of English, you're less satisfied with your job. And if you've got a really high level of English, you're going to be much more satisfied with your job. So it's just data you can share with students and say, learn English. It's really going to help you out, and it's going to make you a little bit happier in your work. So it's just lots of details like that throughout the report. So it's free. Just download it. You can read through it, find stuff that's interesting. It's a good thing. The Global Scale of English is already there. It has a lot of goals in it set up already around employability English. So you can already look at that. And you can see across the top, it can be used by learners, by test takers, by educators, HR professionals, the community, and so there's lots of people who can look at this. But you can find the vocabulary, you can find the grammar, you can find all sorts of things. What's at your level? What should you be learning? And for students, this can be a wake-up call. They can sort of say, "Oh, I see where I should be. I see where I am. I see where I need to go. Okay, it's a clear path for me." And it can help them to set goals. It has a lot of those can-do statements. At this level, I can do this. Start reading through those can-do statements. They'll say, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. Oh, I can't do that. That's interesting. Maybe I need to learn more about that. Oh, it's all about motivation again. So, taking advantage of that. The last point that we're making today, almost done, is how do we measure success? So how do we measure success in the classroom, both learning language and employability skills? Can we measure the outcomes? Yes and no. I often use the metaphor of throwing a stone into a pond, right? You throw a stone into a pond and, this big splash. And that's what we do as teachers. We look at the splash very carefully. We say, okay, they get, A or B or, 50% or 60%, so that's really what we're doing. But really what happens are the ripples. So when we teach something, maybe it doesn't show up until years later. And I know if you've been teaching as long as I have, you have students come up to you and say, you know what, I still remember you taught me this, years ago. And it didn't make sense then, but it makes so much sense now. Or I never thought when you taught me this that I would use this, but I use it every day at work now. So you start hearing those stories and you realize like, okay, maybe it takes a while for it to sink in. So we can't always measure the success immediately. And we certainly can't measure the success just with you know, A, B, C, D questions all the time. So we can check comprehension. Have you understood what we've been teaching? But, you know, that's not really going to, you know, if they can do a thing, yes, employability defines this, you know, those sorts of questions are useful to a certain amount to give us feedback on our teaching. Did I teach them what they're supposed to learn? But maybe not everything. So what can we do? What can we do? Well, we have to find some alternative assessments. And some of the things you can do that are good for, again, language and employability skills are have students role play workshop scenarios. Say, okay, you've got 5 people, you're going to be applying for a job. I want you to write your CVs for this job. And, you know, the other person, 1 person or 3 people are going to be on the committee interviewing each of you. So they'll be asking questions about your CV and about the job. So get ready, prepare, and then you can do it all. It's a safe environment, They can try all of that. Do you need to take marks down? Probably not, you know, because they're going to learn so much through that they will, you know, internalize things, not just from what they do well, but they'll learn more from what they do wrong. And that's a great thing. That's a great thing. If they're really making mistakes and they say, oh, I really have to work on this, on, you know, explaining myself and things. And, you know, so that's really good. Arrange employer visits for mock interviews, same thing, you know, so mock interview. Sorry, those workshop scenarios could also be things where at work, you're just having arguments. You say, you're not doing your half of the work, you know, what's the problem or whatever, and create a negotiation situations where they have to discuss things. How do they solve problems like that? The employer visits and let the employer do some mock interviews and such, it'd be great. And employers are surprisingly interested in doing this because they start to see students and, you know, and who might be future employers. So it's good for them. And then ask students to show what they know in their own ways. I don't care. My own teaching, I teach graduate students and doctoral students, but I often ask them, say, you know, if you want to show me in some other way, you don't have to write an essay. You could do a puppet show or do a PowerPoint or do, you know, something else. If it shows what you've learned in some interesting way, I would love for a student to write a poem about employability skills or something. I don't know, but, you know, just something different. It makes it more entertaining and engaging for you, but it also frees up the students and it shifts responsibility to them for understanding what they're learning and demonstrating what they're learning. Okay, lots of information. So what do we know now? So why are employability skills important? Well, unless you inherited millions of dollars, you're probably going to have to work. So everybody needs them. We need to teach them when and who, you know, so to people who are motivated to learn. So those are mostly teenagers and young adults entering the workplace. What are employers' expectations? They're very, very broad, and it's hard to know exactly what they expect. So it might be specific to different disciplines or different things. Talk to employers or have your students talk to them to find out what the expectations are. How do we integrate employability skills into the language classroom? Don't try to cover everything. Cover the things that are language specific, and then, you know, you'll be accomplishing 2 things for the price of 1. And where do we turn for help? There's lots out there. Look online, talk to your publishers. There's lots of materials and things to help you out. And measuring success, try some alternative assessments and things. So, all right. Whew, lots of information there. Okay, so thank you very much. As I mentioned, the most important information is my email right there, kenbeatty@mac.com. If you have any questions, you can send those to me, and I'm happy to share. Happy to get in a conversation with you about any of that. That's part of my teaching practice. Is I learn more by the questions that you ask. So don't be shy, right? I have have gotten Louisa, thank you. I've gotten a few questions here. Okay, so you said that you had many jobs, knowing that students will face the same problems. What what should we do? What exactly should we do in terms of all of these jobs? Well, how can you prepare people for so many jobs? Well, a lot of the skills, those 7 skills that we talked about, will work with any job that you ever have. And of course, there's some things that are very specific. I'm not going to become a brain surgeon at this point, but a lot of them are very, very general. So teach the general ones that are most useful to everyone. There's another question here about the refugees. When I mentioned refugees, someone is asking about, refugees. Are there things which are, are there any special considerations that we should have? Because again, they have faced trauma. And this teacher was talking about the refugees often don't, the teenagers in her classroom, they're thinking about the Ukraine and they can't concentrate and they misbehave in class. Yeah, it's a really difficult situation, and I don't think we have a rule book for how to proceed with this based on other things. But I do think getting them each to have goals and asking, say, what do you want to learn English for? How do you think English could help you at some point? You could do it as a class task, and maybe different people have different ideas, and they will start to realize that the war will not last forever. At some point, they need to rebuild their country, and they're going to need skills to do that. So be part of the solution, not the problem. So maybe proceed like that. It's a tough one. The last question is standing out from the competition. How do we, that's a big question that students ask. How do I stand out? When I apply for a job, maybe 1,000 people apply or something. How do I stand out? Well, again, I think developing each of these communication skills in reading and especially in speaking and writing are going to put you above the pack. That's the really thing. When you go into that interview or you write an application letter, those are the things that are really going to help you to succeed, right? Okay, again, I'm sorry if you had other questions and I haven't gotten to those, but please just send them to me and I'll get back to you with the best answers that I can. Thank you everybody for being here. And again, thank you to Edumation and Pearson for hosting me today. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.